Hey guys, it's me Nalthazar, and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be going over the mythics and masterpieces from Throne of Eldraine that you're going to want to keep your eyes out for. So Eldraine's coming out next week, probably Tuesday, and there are a lot of really good cards in the set. So in the last video I made, I said that I was going to try and just break it into two. So I'd have one video for the exclusives and one video for non-exclusives, but I'm really going to have to break it into three. There are 77 cards in the set that I think are playable and good and worth trying to get. And so instead of trying to make like an hour-long video, I figure it just makes more sense for me to have the exclusives, the masterpieces, and the mythics, and then the rares, commons, and uncommons. Now, for this, there's going to be a little bit of conjecture because we don't know what the back half of the adventures do yet, but I have a pretty good idea of what they do from the paper versions. So let's get into this. Now, speaking of paper, you're going to see Hogak here first, and maybe you're tired of Hogak from Paper Magic, maybe you're not, but this is a pretty unique card, and it looks really powerful. So Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, is 24 mana for a 16/16 with Trample, Berserker, Convoke 16, and it can't gain mana. Whenever a creature you control dies, if this card's in your hand, exile that creature, then this creature's cost is reduced by 4. Now, this is a card that you're really basically just going to want to special summon in some way, so you're going to want to play it using something like Killer Instinct or something that brings it back from the graveyard or something like that, right? It's not something that you can play using something like Sarkhan, Brokan's third ability, or a card like Summoning Pact or something like that. You won't be able to play it like that. It has to be something that just takes it and puts it directly into play. Now, if you find a way to do that, this card is amazing because it's about the strongest single card in terms of power toughness that we've got in Puzzle Quest. So a 16/16 is just ridiculously strong. And having Berserker and Trample there is pretty nifty too. So if you can find ways to get this on the battlefield, it'll be a really darn good card and really scary. It's probably not going to be something that you have to be super afraid of Greg using because, I mean, Greg might try and cast this or just keep it as the first card in hand, but it can't gain mana. I don't know how it's going to work for that, but it's a pretty cool looking card. There's nothing that's quite so strong as this. Heart of Kiran gets close. But those are Fabricate tokens that are coming down to get it to 16/16. So yeah, this card's definitely worth trying to get your hands on. Next is Kes Dissident Mage. Now this is a pretty cool card, especially if you're running things that will help you discard. So with Kes, whenever you cast a spell, exile that card. At the beginning of your turn, return the first spell card from your graveyard to your hand. It gains full mana. So once Kes comes down, all the spells that you cast are going to get exiled, so you won't be able to go ahead and play them. But there are so many ways within blue, black, and red, which is this creature's colors, to discard cards. I mean, you could even go ahead and use like Experimental Frenzy, right? And then you exile the card from your hand, but it instead goes to your graveyard, and you just get to choose what spell you get to cast for free every single turn like that. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with this card. It's going to be very strong. If you play a few different spells or removal pieces before you use this, then you just get them all back for free. So this is going to be a really strong card and also another one that you're going to want to look out for. Meriden Besieged is a little bit of a weird one. So it has that new busted mechanic of, and I'm jumping straight to the bottom, at the end of your turn, discard a card, then draw a card. If there are 20 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, gain 30 loyalty. So this is really going to work well with cards that are going to put more cards in your graveyard. So if you have things that will do that, then this is going to be amazing. If you don't have things that will do that, then this will be kind of mediocre. But I mean, there's just so many ways of dumping things in your graveyard in Puzzle Quest that this will be pretty scary. The one real check that I feel like they sort of tried to put into the game for this is cards with mill, right? So if you reach that bottom ability and your opponent is running a bunch of cards with mill, then it'll sort of neuter this, but I really don't see that being a big issue. This card is scary and nasty, and if you've got a big collection, definitely go ahead and get your hands on this. It's not one that with a smaller collection will do a whole lot, but yeah. Pasha Leak mons. Ooh, yeah. I love goblins. So if you didn't know that, I love them. If you haven't seen my Cranko video or like other goblin thing, I love them. And Pasha Leak mons is going to be a beast. So it's 10 mana for a 5/5, which is, decent. And then whenever you lose a goblin reinforcement, this creature deals 4 damage to any opposing target and then create 2 goblin tokens. So this is red, and if you run this with Mirror March, then you get a ton of this dude out, and then when all of the reinforcements go away, each reinforcement that you had is going to deal an additional 4 damage to anything you want. And the same will be true for anything else that gets Mirror Marched as long as you're just running goblins. So this card is awesome, super amazing, and I'm sure there are going to be really fun things that you can do in conjunction with it and then those goblin tokens that you're creating. But yeah, it's going to be awesome. Tectonic Reformation. This is going to be another really cool card. So at the beginning of your turn, each land in your hand gains cycling 3. That means you exile it from your hand, and if it has 3 or more mana, then you draw a card. And then whenever you exile a land from your hand, if it has 4 or more mana, destroy 4 red gems, then draw a card. So it makes it so that all of the lands that you have in your hand get cycling. They have a chance to draw you 2 cards, and in destroying all the red gems from the board, as long as you're running a non-Koth planeswalker, right? So one that's going to have better bonuses for non-red colors, this is going to make it so you just gain a ton of mana. So just from exiling lands from your hand. So that's pretty darn cool. I think this is going to be really fun to play with. Definitely not one that I'm worried about Greg using, but yeah. Then here we've got Daenerys, Giver of Runes. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, bad joke, Michael. Bad joke. This thing is 12 mana for a 5/6, and then when you gain Adamant, any color, so anytime you make a match, all of your other creatures gain protection from the color of the gems that you matched until end of turn. So if you make a double match in 2 different colors, boom, your creatures have protection from both of those colors. So you could run this with like a bunch of things that have Defender, right? Or Vigilance or Reach or whatever, and then just match your opponent's colors and laugh at them for days. So it's a pretty cool card. I don't think it's a broken card, but it's a cool card that'll be fun to play with. Now, I went ahead and put all of the little adventure pieces together. So BrazenBorrower, I think, is going to be pretty darn good. It's 8 for a 5/3 flyer, and I'm guessing that it's going to go ahead and bounce something of your opponent's, right? So if we take a look at the paper version of BrazenBorrower, the adventure piece of it is 2 mana, return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that this thing is going to bounce creature, support, something, right? But like a lot of different possibilities for bouncing, and that alone makes it a pretty good card. And so the way that adventure works, just if you've forgotten, is so there's this side here that you see, and then there's a back half of it also. And so when you cast the back half goes away and the creature part comes back to your hand. Now, you could just cast the creature if you want, or you can cast the back half as a spell and then get the creature back. But this I see as a pretty good removal option that can also become a 5/3 flyer. So probably going to be pretty good. This card is going to be incredibly scary. This thing is terrifying. Mark my words. The giants are coming, and they're horrifying, right? So all of the titans that were just made in M20 are giants. So you could sort of go with like a giant theme deck. And so Beanstalk Giant is 12 for a 1/1. So right there, that makes it a card that's going to be amazing for all of your like summon a creature that has X or less power, right? So this dude is going to be amazing for that. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, it gets +X permanently, where X is the number of green gems, right? So most green walkers have ways of making it so that you convert gems to green in some sort of way, right? Or at the very least, you're running lands. So you could very easily be making this an 11/11, 16/16, something in that range for 12 mana, which is pretty darn scary. Now I'm going to go ahead and guess that the adventure piece of this is either going to fetch us lands, or what I'm really hoping for based on this ability is that it's going to convert gems to green. You may have noticed that the cards that have come out since Ixalan haven't really had gem conversion for green. It seems that they made lands, right? Support lands, so that they could get rid of that whole gem conversion thing. Because if you played back in the old days, then you'll know that and maybe because you still play now Legacy events, you'll know that green gem conversion is busted. It's so powerful, like just ridiculously powerful. So what the paper version of this guy does is the sorcery piece is search your library for a basic land and put it directly on the battlefield. So that's why I'm guessing that it's either going to fetch us a land and put it directly out, or my hope is that it's going to go ahead and convert gems to green. But this is going to be really, really powerful and probably a really scary card to deal with. Now, the last of the adventures that I put here for the Mythic Masterpiece level is Realm Cloak Giant. So this is 14 for a 9/9 with Selective Vigilance. I love this creature gains Vigilance while its toughness is greater than an opposing creature's power. And if you look at the paper version of this card, it has a sorcery that's basically just destroy all non-giant creatures. So you could run this dude, and I'm going to guess that the back half is either going to be destroy all other creatures or destroy all non-giants. But if you run this dude with like this dude, right, that's going to be a green-white deck. So you could run it in Hualti, you could run it in Ajani, you could run it in Tamio, and then you throw in a third giant like Primeval Titan or Frost Titan, and you've got yourself a really nasty Corridor deck, right? So between Primeval Titan and this dude, you're going to get a bunch of lands or green gems, and this thing's going to become big and nasty. This dude's going to wipe all of the other non-giants off the field, and the giants themselves have huge power toughnesses for very reasonable mana costs. So the dinosaurs are phasing out, and the giants are stomping in. Okay, non-adventures. Clack Bridge Troll. This card is more just going to be a decent card probably for destroy X or more creature objectives. So it's 16 for a 12/12 with haste. It creates 3 goat tokens for your opponent. And then at the beginning of combat, on your turn, your opponent loses a creature reinforcement, you gain 6 life, draw a card, and this thing gets disabled for a turn. So as long as your opponent has creatures down, this dude is bad. But he's going to make tokens for your opponent, and that's the real key to this. So you can use this for destroy creature objectives. This card here I think is really cool. I didn't think it was so cool the first time that I read it, but the more that I read it, the more that I love it. So whenever a black creature enters the battlefield under your control, your opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Whenever a black creature you control dies or loses a reinforcement, draw a card, it gains half of its mana. So the reason I think this is such a darn good card is if you use this with all of the things that make zombie tokens, especially like a few of the actually decent amass cards, so the enchantment that puts amass creatures out every turn, or the Liliana Dreadhorde Vanguard. So, I mean, if you've got those 2 down, you're making 4 zombie tokens when Liliana gets fixed. And so those 4 zombie tokens are going to come into play and deal 8 to your opponent and give you 8 life every turn. And then if you pair this with, I don't know, say Liliana Death's Majesty, so you can anoint that first ability where you're just going to have your creatures leave and come back, leave and come back. And when you do that, that counts as destroying a creature. So that creature is going to be black, it's going to die, you're going to draw a card, and it gains half mana. So you're going to get a ton of card draw out of this. It's going to deal damage upon entering the battlefield again. And then if you play the Horde tokens, right, then those 4 zombies that are coming out every turn are going to be dealing 16 from Horde, 8 from this, for a total of 24 a turn. And you could get more Horde stacks down. Like, this is just going to be really cool synergy with zombie tokens. So I'm really excited to try it out. I don't know if it'll wind up being top tier, but it definitely has the potential to be. So I think it's cool. Doom Foretold is pretty terrifying because it gives black a really good way of destroying supports and vanguards. So at the beginning of your opponent's turn, destroy an opposing non-land, non-token support, or vanguard support. If you can't, your opponent discards a card, loses 5 life, and you gain 5 life and create 2 night tokens. Then destroy the support. So once your opponent gets supports down, this is just going to destroy one every turn in the way that sort of haphazard bombardment does. Except then when they run out of supports, this thing still gives you a net positive ability in taking 5 life away from your opponent, giving you 5, and creating 2 night tokens. Maybe they're going to be just flat 4/4 total. Maybe it's going to be 4/4 with vigilance total, right? The 2 tokens are going to be 2/2s each, but still, this is a really good card, so definitely worth getting. Ember Cleave. This gives your first creature double strike, trample, and berserker. So Whenever a creature you control attacks, this card gains 3 mana. While the support is on the board, the first creature you control gets that 2/2 and the Double Strike, Trample, and Berserker. So if you've got 3 creatures out, then this thing's gaining 9 mana a turn. It has a very reasonable number of shields, and honestly, it's going to be a pretty scary card, especially when we get into some of the other artifact pieces that come out in the set, or things that like benefit from artifacts. This could be a really nasty card. So if you get your hands on this, it'll honestly be a lot easier to play than the 23 mana looks like it will be, and it's going to make a creature downright scary. Emory. She's holding this sword right here. Look at that. I mean, maybe she's not, but it kind of looks like it, right? I mean, maybe. So she's destined for that thing, man. I mean, like, look at this. At the end of your turn, return the first artifact from your graveyard to play. And then that first ability, or sorry, the second, when this creature enters the battlefield, destroy the top 5 cards from your library. So, I mean, if you're running an artifact deck, this thing enters the battlefield, artifacts get dumped into the graveyard, and then this thing brings them back every single turn. And furthermore, this card's cost is reduced by 1 for each artifact you control. That includes artifact tokens. So fabricate tokens, if you're running Tezzeret with the second ability that makes 2 servos every turn, each of those 2 servos reduces this thing's cost by 1. If you're running food tokens, those are artifacts, they're going to all reduce the cost of this thing by 1. So this thing's going to become a really cheap way of dumping things in your graveyard and then just getting artifacts back for free. So this card is going to be super amazing. You definitely want to get your paws on this. Escape to the Wilds, as I was reading through the set, this is the card that caught my eye the most. Apart from goblins, my other love is lands right now. And this thing draws you 5 cards. It's both red and green. So green, as you've heard from me ad nauseum, it struggles with card draw. Red, as you've heard from me ad nauseum, struggles with card draw. We're losing Apex of Power with the standard shift, and this just slots right into all of those Apex of Power decks. So you're drawing 5 cards for them. For this, you're going to get a bunch of lands. All those lands are going to be able to be played for free. Amazing card all around. This is definitely going to be a staple in pretty much every one of my red and green decks probably. So definitely worth chasing. Fires of Invention I threw in because a lot of other people seem to like it, and I threw it in because it's definitely a cool card, but I don't think it's as good as people think it is. So whenever you cast the second card on your turn, disable all cards in your hand until end of turn. At the beginning of your turn, reduce the cost of each card in your hand by X until end of turn, where X is the number of gems of your Planeswalker's colors. So let's go ahead and, for the sake of argument, assume that you're going to be able to reduce the cost of everything in your hand by like 10 to 15. You can't really go and combo off because you get to play 2 cards a turn and then that's it. And there are so many really powerful things in the game that make it so that you can play a bunch of things in a turn, and there's just so many ways of like drawing cards and gaining mana and stuff like that I really feel like this card will wind up being underwhelming. It very well may not, and I might wind up eating my words in like a month, but I don't think so. So it's a cool card, definitely, and I definitely want to play around with it, but I don't see it taking a permanent hold in my red decks. This is sneakily scary. So Harmonious Archon is 20 for an 8/9. While this creature's on the battlefield, non-Archon creatures on the battlefield have base power toughness 3/3. When this creature enters the battlefield, create 3 white human tokens. Now, we can ignore what human tokens are going to do because of the first ability of this, but we can assume they're 1/1s. Yeah, but I mean, like, this thing's going to make them have a base power toughness of 3/3. So when you play this thing for 20, you're getting an 8/9 and you're getting a 9/9 because the 3 human tokens, regardless of what their power toughness are going to become base power toughness 3/3 creatures. So you're getting 17 power for 20 mana. This card is terrifying. And on top of that, right, like your opponent plays some kind of nasty hasty critter. I mean, with this thing down, the bacon pig comes out, and it comes out as a 3/3. And then what, right? Your little white human tokens that you've made are going to be able to block it and kill it, right? It gives itself Berserker, so they don't block it. It attacks them. But whatever. This card is amazing. It's amazing for so many different things. It's going to lock down your opponent's nasty creatures. It's going to make it so that if you're playing a token deck, your tokens become even more sickeningly powerful. This is amazing. You have to get this card. Linden, the Steadfast Queen, is kind of what I feel like every leader should be. So it's not busted, but it's really darn good and would definitely be worth playing in a human or knight deck. So it's 8 for a 2/2, which, you know, I mean, the knights are probably going to be 2/2s. And then this creature gains vigilance while its toughness is greater than opposing creature's power. Once again, I love selective vigilance. And then whenever this creature attacks, gain X life, where X is this creature's reinforcements. So it's kind of like half lifelink, but, you know, I mean, it's going to be giving you life. It's going to have selective vigilance, and it's going to be eating up all those human and knight tokens. So it's going to buff itself up pretty well. And it's only 8 mana. So it's a pretty solid card all around. Lockmere's Serpent. All right, this is our first mill card in the list. So remember, mill is going to activate if your opponent has the X number of cards in the graveyard or more. In this case, 15. But the real piece for Lockmere's Serpent is it's 21 for a 7/7. Okay. It's unblockable and it's got flash. Okay. But the activate 2 are both, it's such a really good ability. Like a really good, haha. It's such a good ability, right? Like look at that. Destroy 6 blue or black gems, gain 3 life, and draw a card. So the activations are probably going to be on blue or black. So really, if you activate one, it's probably going to destroy the other and activate the other. And then you're destroying 12 gems, gaining 6 life, and drawing 2 cards. And so in destroying those gems, you're probably going to be gaining a ton of mana. So the cards that you're drawing, I mean, I guess, you know, it's going to destroy the gems before you draw the card based on the order of the words, most likely. But like you're going to be drawing cards, you're going to get a ton of mana. You're going to be able to play those cards with the mana that you're going to be getting from this happening pretty frequently. So if you're running this with gem converters, you're going to be able to activate those pretty reliably. And it's just going to give you so much card draw, really decent life, and so much mana that this is probably going to be a much better card than it looks like on the surface. And even better than that is if your opponent winds up destroying it, then maybe you get that mill 15 and you get it back for free with an additional 7/7, so it comes back as a 14/14. So the mill 15 is at the beginning of your turn. If this card is in your graveyard, exile 15 cards from your opponent's graveyard, then return this creature to the battlefield under your control. It gets +7/+7. So this is a really darn good card. You're definitely going to want it. Piper of the Swarm, I think, is more just like a really fun card, but it could wind up being really powerful. So whenever you convert 2 or more gems to black, create 2 Rat Plague tokens. The Rat Plague tokens clearly are going to be supports based on the second half of this. So at the beginning of your opponent's turn, if you control 2 or less creatures, and if a Rat Plague support you control has 10 or more shield, that support loses 9 shield, so your Rat token, and then gain control of your opponent's first creature. Now, getting those Rat Plague tokens is going to be really easy if you're playing all of the black land cards that convert gems to black. So you got 2 of those down, you're getting 4 of those tokens a turn. You get 3 of them down, you're getting 6. It's going to happen really quickly, really easily. This thing's going to be really easy to play at 9 mana. So you're just going to start stealing all your opponent's stuff, and pretty cool. Robber of the Rich is just a cheap person's Atali, but Atali is still pretty good, so this is still going to be pretty good. This creature gains reach while an opposing creature has flying. I don't like that on the 4/4 body, but whenever a rogue creature, and this is a rogue, attacks, fetch the top card from your opponent's library and it gains half its mana. So start stealing your opponent's stuff, playing it, and enjoy the lulz. Now we get to the Cauldrons. The Cauldrons are all really nasty, but they're all going to require other things to make them good. So it's 24 mana. That's incredibly steep. This card's cost is reduced by 1 for each creature card in your graveyard. That's going to take a really long time to get enough creatures in your graveyard that this mana drop is anything significant. Whenever a creature you control dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library. And then at the end of your turn, if there are 1 or more creature cards in your graveyard, lose 3 life, then return the first creature card from your graveyard to play under your control. So keep in mind, once the Cauldron comes down, the creatures that you control that die, they're just going to go to the bottom of your library, so they're not going to be coming back anymore. I'm not sure if this will still impact Gather the Pack and abilities like that, or things that mill you. I'm going to guess not. So I'm going to guess that they'll still go to the graveyard and you'll still be able to get them back. Unfortunately, this does make you lose life, but it's still going to be a really powerful card. I think that Death Bridge Chant, whatever that is still a better card than this, but in conjunction, and especially with Kethris, or whatever that White King dude is, yeah, you can get a bunch of creatures back from your graveyard and do some really nasty things. Circle of Loyalty is another one that it's pretty decent. It looks more like it's going to be fun and very good for completing night objectives, which is going to make it worth having on its own. So this card costs 2 less for each night you control. While this support's on the board, your creatures get +2/+2. Whenever you cast a legendary card, this included, create a night token, and then activate 2 to create night tokens. So this really is just going to make it so that your legendary stuff is going to make night tokens, you produce more night tokens, and they all have a little bit more power. It costs 2 less for each night you control. I wish that it included reinforcements, but unfortunately it does not. So that limits the power, but it's still definitely a good card. The Great Henge. This is going to cost X less, where X is the highest power among creatures you control. That's going to be really easy to make this a really cheap card. Activate 2, gain 1 life and 1 mana for each green gem. That's awesome. You're going to get so much mana and so much life from those things. Like, so much. And then whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw 2 cards, then that creature gets +2/+2. So yeah, this is going to fill up your hand. It's going to buff up your creatures. You're going to get ridiculous mana gains from those activations. And it's honestly going to be really easy to cast because of the creature power piece. So this is one that you're definitely going to want to target. Of the Henges, I think that's the best one. Probably. I haven't tested them, but, you know, guesswork here. The Magic Mirror, the blue one, this one's also pretty good. So it's 26 mana. That's terrifying. And then this card's cost is reduced by 1 for each spell card in your graveyard. It's going to take a while to get those in there, yeah, especially because you need 26 for this thing to cost 0. At the end of your turn, draw 2 cards, then reinforce this support. Those cards gain 2 mana for each of this support's shields. There's a bunch of different cards right now that are out there that increase your support's shields, but the big takeaway is that this is an artifact, and you can run it with our Merfolk Wizard from earlier that's going to dump it in the graveyard and bring it back for free, and then they'll just start reinforcing themselves, and if you're running New Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, then you're going to be popping that final ultimate ability and getting a bunch more of these, and maybe you have that masterpiece that gives you 30 loyalty a turn, so you're just using Tezzeret's Third every turn, and then you've just got lulls so many cards with all mana. So it could be really cool, really fun. I am actually really excited about these cards. Torbran, Thane of Red Fell. This card is actually better than it looks at first glance. When I first read it, I was like, yeah, no, this is not good. But then upon second glance, I was like, you know, this actually isn't that bad, right? So it's 14 for a 6/6. I call it a 6/6 because at the beginning of each combat, your red creatures get +3/0 until end of turn. And so this is going to get that 3/0. It's going to give that 3/0 to your other creatures. So foreseeably, this thing could wind up being, 3 and 9 for 12 power for 14, which is decent. And then whenever you cast a red spell, it deals 3 damage to any target. This isn't a card that's going to break the game at all for people who have like every card in the game. But if you're newer to the game, or you don't have all those cards, or maybe you're not in platinum, this is a card that can just outright win games for you. So definitely worth it. I would definitely target it. It's a good card. Wicked Wolf is what sold me on food tokens, actually. This card is incredibly nasty with food. So at the end of your turn, if you control 3 or more food tokens, this creature gets permanently +2/+2. Then it gains prevent damage until end of turn and fights target opposing creature. So as long as you've got 3 food tokens out, then, I mean, every single turn of yours, you're going to be fighting an opponent's creature. This thing's going to have prevent damage, so it's going to take no damage for it. It's going to be a 7/7 and a 9/9 and an 11/11. It's going to buff up really fast, and it's going to be amazing control. So this card is going to be disgusting, especially with how much food production there is. So yeah, if you want to try a food deck out, definitely get this card, and you'll probably have a lot of fun with it. So I think that was that. No, yeah, Yorvo, you're the last one, I think, maybe. Yeah, so Yorvo is also pretty darn cool. So 12 for a 1/1. It's going to fulfill the same purpose as our giant from earlier. And oh yeah, and he's a giant too, right? So when you have objectives where you need power X or less, this dude is going to be awesome for that. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, it gets 5/5. So it's really 12 for a 6/6. And then whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, this creature gets +1/+1. Then if that creature's power is greater than this creature's, it gets an additional +2/+2, meaning it would get +3/+3. So if you're playing a token deck and you're bumping out a bunch of green tokens, then all those tokens are going to come out and they're going to be making themselves bigger, and they're going to be making this dude bigger by 3 too. So this dude's going to get much, much, much bigger with tokens. So I'm specifically thinking Nissa Worldwaker with the elemental tokens, with Nissa who shakes the world and using her third ability to get the leader down, and then other shenanigans and nonsense like that. But this dude has the potential to be a really darn good card. So that does it for Mythics and Masterpieces. Yeah, but I think that all of these cards are going to be worth getting. Some of them are definitely better than others, but there's a lot of cards to chase in this set, and it looks like we're going to have a lot of fun playing with a lot of new cards and a lot of new play styles. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope it's helped you narrow down which cards you want to target yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.